In this lesson, I'll take the planes with the textures from my storyboards and scale them up and space them out in depth. Then I'll animate a camera in there to get this first animatic going. I'll start out by getting the initial shot ready. I want my sky and my large city background skyline. I'll take both of these elements, holding Control to select one and then the other, press R for scale, and scale them both up. In this case, we're really not after a precise size as much as the correct movement and framing in the camera. We'll deal with size later when we set up a true camera with the right objects. What we're concerned about here is how are things composed in the frame, what are we supposed to look at, where are we moving, and where are the characters looking, if there are characters. I'll take this city image and slide it over the background. As we can see when I spin around, I've spaced it out in depth as well. Now I'll get a camera in for my first image. I'll use a free camera in this case, starting out in a front view and creating a free camera on the city. I'll switch this camera to a 35mm lens, and I'll also set up the render size so that the resolution gate, or the safe frame, works correctly. I'll go to the render setup, and under output size in the common tab, I'll choose HD TV video and picking 1280 by 720. Now when I press Shift F, I get the correct frame inside this yellow border. That's actually what will render. I'll take the camera, pull it back, and hit C for camera to see if it works. It's pretty good, but it's a little close. I'll use the dolly tool and dolly the camera back to get the right framing, panning as needed as well. This is kind of what I want in my initial frame. I know I need to resize the sky. I can do that easily. What I really care about is having all or most of this city framed in nicely. I'll scale up the sky to fit correct in the view. I'll scale up the sky to fit correctly in the view, moving it if needed. This is my initial view. In my camera shot, I want to dolly back or move the camera back on its z-axis, all the way back to reveal in the end the eco standing on the road outside the city, looking at the pollution. The way I'll do this is I'll start with my initial frame and turn on auto key by pressing N. I'll go over, let's say 3 seconds, 72 frames, making sure that I'm running at 24 frames a second in this case, and move the camera back a distance. I'll go into my time configuration and make sure that I'm running at 24 here. There we go. So, 72 frames, or 3 seconds at 24 frames a second. In my top view, I'll move the camera back, selecting it, and dollying straight back. Auto key creates keys automatically for me at 0 and 72. In my camera view, here's the animation. Nice easy dolly back. Good for now. What I'll do is line up the rest of the elements, scaling and moving them, to match into this view, and ending up looking at the eco on the road through the trees. I'll finish this and show what it looks like. I've finished spacing out the elements, moving them, and checking along the way how they look through the camera. As you can see here, I've actually got the hills and the trees scaled quite larger than the city. It's okay in this one. I'm looking really for the composition and framing. We'll deal with the size of the elements later, but I know how I want them to look in the camera, and that's really the important part here. I'll hit C for my camera view and scrub through this. I start in fairly close in the city, seeing the freeway streaming by with all the cars, and pulling back past the crane, between the buildings, by several other buildings, and right under the trees to see the eco framed right here actually on the third lines. And if you look up the rule of thirds, it's a great technique for composition and framing to draw somebody into an image. There he is standing on the road looking at the city. My animation is pretty good. Probably the last thing I want to do is make sure that the keys on the camera are eased, so it comes slowly to a stop. We can always come and play with elements by selecting them, moving them, scaling, rotating, adding more to flesh out the animatic. But really quickly, I have a communicable tool I can use and say, this is what we're doing, here's what we need to see in this particular scene. I'm going to select my camera by right-clicking on the camera in the viewport title here. And with the camera selected, I have the keys available. And I can pick a key and right-click on it and just switch their type. I've selected the camera by choosing the camera name and picking Select Camera from the viewport label. Now I'll pick the keys, and I can fairly easily change their easing. I'll right-click on the key and choose Camera 1 Z position, and there's the in and out tangents. I'll make sure that these are slow. We go slow in and slow out, and I'll do this on keys 1 and 2. Alternately, I could do this in the graph editor or wherever I'd like. There's a number of ways to do this. Down here in the track view, I see the same thing. There's my keys on the X, Y, and Z, and I can take all of these keys if needed and apply a slow tangent to them. I'll go back and play. Looks pretty good. Here's the neat part about the material setup the way I did it. Really what I want to do is render this with no lights. I can run this in even just the standard max scanline renderer for speed. I'll turn that on, the default scanline. And I don't need any ray tracing. I don't need really any lighting or anything. I would like to have anti-aliasing on. Enabling SSE for a little better speed is always good. And I'm ready. I'm going to set this up to run out as a QuickTime movie, render it, and show what it looks like. Here's the rendered version of the final movie. I'll hit play and Control-L to loop a couple of times. It's a little fast. You might want to add a second or use a dissolve in there to eat up some of the distance. But I am communicating pretty clearly what I want to see in the frame.